framing to me is really just establishing that frame or that picture that when you communicate, the other person is seeing their perspective through that context. And that allows you to communicate better and ultimately get outcomes that you're seeking to have. As long as they're good intention, I think it's all good.
It's time to get inside your own head. Begin with the psychology behind your behaviors and fuse it with an acute understanding of self-awareness, emotion, storytelling, body language, and more. Then look at it all through the lens of the latest neuroscience research, broken down to its most digestible form. And you've arrived. Enhanced messaging, deeper connection, heightened influence, and a greater impact on the world. Welcome to the neuroside of influence and leadership with Rene Rodriguez.
First of all, thanks for making the time. When you and I first met, it was almost like a kindred brother spirit soul of two people that almost studied, researched some of the same stuff, applied it in very different ways, and came together and just realized that there's so much more that can be done. So I kind of want to have a conversation of those things, specifically around one of your big passions, which is framing. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I already see the smile come up when we think of framing. Tell me about just what does framing mean to you? When did you first run into it?
I mean, look, the framing or whatever, the shaping your opinions on life, there's only a few people that really do it. And you don't recognize that when it's happening until it happened. And you're like, my perspective has shifted to a new perspective. And it's been shaped by you, authors, my dad, people that are really close to me. And framing is one of those things I stumbled upon. And frankly speaking, I thought it was stupid. The first time I heard it, I'm like, frames, what are you talking about? This is way too combative for, my style of life. I'm pretty, keep it cool and just have a good time. But when you start realizing that frames exist, you can't unsee it. Yeah. It's like seeing the windmill dunk for the first time. You're just like, wow, you can do that? And then it changes everything. So, framing to me is really just establishing that frame or that picture that when you communicate, the other person is seeing their perspective through that context. And that allows you to communicate better and ultimately get outcomes that you're seeking to have. As long as they're good intention, I think it's all good.
And I think you and I have had that discussion too of once you understand the power of framing, that the ethical conversation should be right next to it. There's an ethical use of influence, an ethical use of framing. And I mean, that was one of the first conversations we had, was saying, okay, so just because we can shift perception, which in essence shifts reality for people, because perception equals reality, how have you found yourself managing that dilemma?
I think a lot of people that have not heard it before will say, oh, that sounds like manipulation. I'm like, no. That's not the intent at all. Actually, it's the opposite. Whenever you meet anyone, the whole goal in a conversation is to communicate and be understood how you intend to be understood. Yeah. And by putting labels or even context to that communication style and start understanding what the receiver and their style of communication, it allows you to speak in a way or frame in a way that allows you to really communicate better. And so they understand what you're intending to say versus seeing it from a different perspective or, falling in to a victim of being, defensive or reacting versus being thoughtful in your conversation. I think that is the difference to me than, looking at it from a negative way. Of course, influence can be positive and influence can be negative. And one of my core beliefs is that negative influence is the most powerful and in a bad way. Yeah. And that to combat that, positive influence is really tiring and hard. And it really takes a collective of people to commit to positive influence versus negative. Because resorting to negative influence, I've had a bad day. Traffic was bad. The weather sucks. Let's pile on the problems. That's easy and super contagious. The opposite's harder, and I really think framing is a good way to positively influence folks, whether that's through communication, whether that's through leadership, whether that's sales, doesn't really matter. It's about how can you get a positive reaction to people that you're trying to influence.
So I love that, because what I'm hearing you say is that influence is going to happen regardless. And
For sure.
Kids try to influence, they frame, women frame, men frame, everybody uses a frame, which is building a context to a message before. Like, all right, before I tell you, let me tell you what's happening.
Yeah.
Like, just that, they already know they're framing right now. And whether they're doing it because they learned, or they learn just by that contextualization is important, everyone's framing. But I love what you're saying is that even people that don't understand what framing is, just by their attitude and coming in and seeing all the negative things, it becomes contagious, and you have to be just as diligent on pointing out the positive and pointing out what else is going on. Both are realities. I was telling my son about positive and negative. I said, okay, I'll give you an example.
Right.
And he goes, okay. I said, well, I can make a case right now as to why my life sucks. And I gave him 5-6 things, and he's like, and you watch his body language just start falling. and I go, but I give you a case why my life's amazing. And I gave him 5 or 6 things that were just insane, awesome. He's like, and I go, which one's true? And he's like sitting there. I said, here's the thing, they're both true, but my reality is based on which one I decide to focus on. Now, some of these are going to be tough, but I can't control all those things. And so the frame is about how do I manage life through that. So as a leader, your job, you're telling me, and can you expand on that a little bit about?
Yeah. So leadership, as I've learned and defined it through discussions with you and others, is how can you, it's sameness, right? Get people to do and think and go for the same goal. And there's all sorts of leaders. However, in absence of leadership around the same goals and positive, negative leadership will win out every time. You think back to sports, it's something big in my life, and I can't help but tie everything back to it. It's really easy to let the guy or gal that's not playing, having a bad year, thinking about leaving, whatever, a me guy versus a we guy, to take everything down. Even if you have the best momentum, the best team, you have the most talent, all the cards are in your favor, one negative guy can ruin it all. One negative coach can ruin it all. But committing to positive influence or positive sameness, that's the only way. One positive guy will not change a bunch of negative people. But one negative person can change a bunch of positive guys, and that's scary. And you see that in everyday media. You see it all the time. There's high contrast in the types of way people think, and sensationalism of the stories really drives a negative perspective on what's going on. It's hard to stay kind of centered in your perspective because that's just not how we consume media. And I think leadership is combating all of those externalities all the time about a common goal and understanding that, yes, things will go wrong. Yes, bad days will happen. Yes, things will fall off track. But the sooner we can learn about it, the sooner we can do something about it. So flipping the script on what's really negative by making negative positives in the sense of at least we know. Now let's do something.
Can you give me an example? Because what I want to get past is, people going, oh, he's just talking about positive thinking. Because what you're saying is profound. It's very deep. Because you're talking about the purpose of a leader, the daily battle against the negative bias that pulls us even biologically and physiologically. And from a neuroscience perspective, we're geared toward that negative bias. Tell me, maybe give me an example of how you've had to battle that, or maybe one frame you've been able to reframe for people that may have been, if you hadn't shown up, been framed in a negative way.
We talk about, objectives. We call them rocks. And it's a Steve Covey concept, but really priorities that really matter.
Yeah.
So the most important
The
things.
big rocks.
The big rocks.
Yeah.
And so in a situation where, a weekly status update and someone, myself, is reporting on a rock and saying, yeah, it's on track, but it's off track. But you tell the team, it's on track, it's on track, it's on track. 13 weeks go by, week 13, off track, quarter's over, and everyone's like, wait a second, I thought it was on track. But they're so afraid of saying the negative truth that they didn't bring it up. They just kept kicking the can. And ultimately, that's worse off.
Yeah.
Now flip the script and do it a different way. Week 1, off track, guys, I need help. Who can help me? Oh, have you thought about this? Have you called this person? What if we try this? How about we put a team on that and help you out with this rock? Because it seems like it's a big rock to move. And then maybe you don't get the goal at the end, at least you have the team around it. So in the end, if you miss, it's no surprise, because the worst news is the ones that's not talked about.
Because the negative frame is that saying I'm off track is bad. The frame with your company is, no, the bad is waiting till 13 weeks. The good thing is actually to tell us right away.
Yeah, I think you have to celebrate bad news. Definitely celebrate good news because it's great, but you have to celebrate bad news because then you can do something about it. So we try to look at...
Even that's a frame, celebrating bad news.
Yeah, I've never thought about it. I mean, labeling things in general to give it context so it's repeatable. I think people like you, my dad, Jerry Lorenzen, other charismatic folks that are just good at stuff. You constantly like, man, this guy, born leader or taught leader, or you're born for sales. I disagree. It's taking things that people like you guys do and saying, wait a second, let's dissect that. Let's really look into what Rene is doing here and how he's communicating, and let's put a process in place where that's teachable, because it's in everyone. Everyone can be taught how to manage people. Everyone can be taught how to lead people. Everyone can be taught how to tell stories. You know how many things online is like, be a great storyteller. It's not about just telling stories. It's about taking all of that, learning how to communicate to be effective at what you're trying to do. And I think that's where changing the frame around bad news is so important, because there was a time at Puris, we were scaling up a business. It's hard. Yeah. And it feels like you're not moving that rock at all. And your forecast, your budget, your projections are all wrong. And typically the day you put them down on paper in a growth business, they're wrong.
They're wrong already.
And then when you start missing those, and it's hard to explain, the negative news, the negative reality just gets stacked on top of you, and you have to say, pause. Let's not lose perspective of where we came from. Even though we're not where we want to be, let's start celebrating good news. And like I said, build process to force it out. And we actually today, we do something we call TW1 forecasting.
TW1.
And TW1 doesn't mean a lot to people probably watching this, but to Puris, TW1 stands for Together We Are One. Right. It's a core value of partnership. That's right. Yeah. Together We Are One. And we call it TW1 forecasting because we bring all the cross-functional team together on one Zoom call now, but typically in one room, or everyone gets together, conference call, and we forecast what's going to happen in the next month. We don't talk about what's happened. Yes, we use that to help build our forecast, but we can't always just look backwards. You have to look forward, and that allows you to take bad news and do something about it, because that's ultimately what everyone wants to do. People want to be successful. They want to have fun. They want a good life. And bad news sucks, but if you talk about it, you can be actionable around making it different and changing the reality of the situation. And I think that's been a huge learning curve for me in my development as a CEO is, if you're always just command and control and just focused on all the negative stuff, it's very easy to fall into that trap. But you have to pull yourself out and remember that, it's about the journey, and don't forget the change that's occurred, because it's really, really important and beautiful. You just celebrate it. And then that builds an environment where bad news isn't so scary anymore.
What I loved, since we met, you were always so good about taking the courageous step about putting a stake in the sand, even though you knew, like you said, we're not going to hit this. But we at least have to put it out there to start going towards it. Mm-hmm. Even though we don't hit it, we've still moved this. And to help an organization still feel successful in the quote-unquote miss was a huge endeavor for you. I watched you do it, and it was masterful. Absolutely masterful.
It's I don't know about that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
It doesn't feel masterful when you're missing it.
Doesn't feel it.
But you still, as an outsider that had nothing to lose, right? Mm-hmm. Watching you guys all take those steps and saying, here's where we are, and then having the courage to do that. But then the team, because that's what you created, was a team that felt that together and still celebrated the loss, but still took a moment to look at where we came from. But then your culture is also one to say, let's not celebrate too long. We still got the grind.
Yeah.
We still got the next step.
Almost too much. You look at athletes and, big championships. You watch the Michael Jordan documentary.
Almost. I'm not there yet.
Not there yet.
I'm holding off so I can watch it all at once.
So Tim Grover is his trainer in that movie. He has a pretty good book that's if you want to learn about MJ, Kobe, Dwayne Wade.
You gave it to me, Relentless.
Yeah, Relentless, exactly. He talks about what MJ holds up after every championship. So he wins number 5. Well, he holds up 5. No, he says he holds up 6 because he's talking about the next one. And that just shows you how insane he is that he's not even going to celebrate the win. He almost celebrated in relief. And you see some of these great players hit the pinnacle of what's possible in sport, and then they're like, that's it?
Yeah.
What's next? And to me, that's in business, the difference of sports is it's game day every day.
Yeah.
It's every year, it's constant grind. There's no reset. There's no game at the end of the week. There's no championship per year. You have to create that environment of wins and losses. But the key thing is doing it together both ways. And that's where TW1, Together We're One, is really what it's about, just getting clarity and open book on what does winning look like, what does losing look like, how do we do it, how do we combat losing, because losing is no fun, and how do we win more and have a good time doing it while building an environment of safety, which is language you gave me, to talk about the truth and feelings and negatives and all the things.
All the stuff, right? So listen, I want to dissect that a little bit because I think it's again genius where you didn't just say, hey, let's do a TW1 meeting. You said, hold on a second. There's a problem that we're always looking backwards. So identification of the problem, right? Mm-hmm. So then we need to figure out a way to look forward.
Right.
And you said, okay, so if we're going to do that, what does that mean to us as our value? One, you incorporated that's part of the frame, and then we want to be together, and you put a label. You're so good. You guys are so good at labeling things, which then makes it tangible and almost branded, creates the emotional attachment around it, to then reframe a meeting to look forward, which solves a problem of always looking backwards. And so it almost or balances it out.
Balances.
And so like for those listening, I'm thinking to themselves to look at the pattern of that and to think, what challenge do we have? And what could we do based on our core values to frame a new endeavor, meeting, whatever it is, to balance that piece. I love that. No.
You're right on. And by no means did we invent this concept. I think the bigger the business, the more processes are in place to, manage it. And this is probably standard work in, Fortune 500 companies and so on and so forth. But with high growth companies, you're growing in dog years.
Yeah.
You wake up and your business is a lot different than it was a quarter ago, and you start rewinding 5 years and you're like, holy smokes, the industry is completely changed in 5 years, not just grown, completely changed. And that really requires you to have a growth mindset and to constantly change your business because it has to grow or it'll break and crumble. And so that's been how we're looking at people like Cargill, 3M, authors like Jack Stack in The Great Game of Business and Scaling Up, Verne some of the stuff that, probably out there, it's been out there. But you can take it and apply it to your challenge, and it can really help, bring everyone together and ultimately win. Because that's what people want to have fun. Like in the end, like
and winning's fun.
It's got to be fun.
And winning is fun.
Winning is way better than losing. That is for sure.
So you brought up some sports. Can you go back to because I think your background and history and how you got to where you are now, I think sets the frame of some of the stuff I want to talk about. So just start wherever you want.
Yeah, well, I grew up, so the business I run today is a family company. So I grew up at a young age running parts of this company. And when I say that, I was a corn breeder. My dad is a plant breeder, and the whole basis of Puris is a plant-based protein company. So we develop seeds, farmers grow it, then we make ingredients and sell it to products that you eat in stores now. And I know you eat them.
We ate a lot of them.
Eat them, Plant Strong, baby. But that's what I did as a kid because it was a family business. It was tiny back in the early 80s, early 90s, or late 80s, early 90s, excuse me. But what my passion was football. Yeah. Actually, basketball was my heart, but football was what came most naturally. And I was a QB. I went to a town of 900 people, class of 23 in grade school, and I remember telling my teacher in 5th grade I was going to play pro football. She laughed at me. And I was like, my perspective was someone's got to do it. Why not me? Someone's got to do it.
Well, with a dad like you, I can see where that mindset comes from.
My dad is limitless in what's possible, and it's exhausting. no doubt, for most people. But as a kid, and that's just every day, it was just normal life.
Yeah.
Like, you get what you believe. And without doubt, you can do anything. Your body is designed to be perfect. Just let it go. Let it all hang out. Practice, prepare, do all the hard stuff, dedicate, sacrifice, don't drink, don't do drugs, all of these things. And then when the game time comes, you've done all the hard work, just let your mind go and just be you. And so that's how I went after sports, and which was exciting, and it was an interesting journey. Not perfect. Coming from a tiny school, it's hard to get recruited, hard to get noticed. But over the years, I was able to achieve part of my dream, which was playing D1 college quarterback. Went to UCONN, which was a roundabout way. Played JUCO in Cali. Started off at Iowa State, but we were good. We were Co-Big East champs 2007,
nice.
So not too bad. And that took me to really pro football. And again, like the journey requires, you have to adapt. And I was a good college quarterback, but I wasn't good enough to play pro. And they switched my positions to tight end. So, draft comes. I'll never forget this. I was in Minneapolis at my sister's house. Every round goes by. There's only 3 quarterbacks taken that year, 3 or 4. They're all studs. And a Heisman finalist, Chase Daniel, not drafted. He's still in the league for like 10 years now. Not drafted. So I'm an undrafted guy. I'm like, what's going to happen? My phone rings. It's Mike Tice, of all people, Minnesota guy. So all you Minneapolis folks will like this. And he's saying, hey, Tyler Lorenzen, yo, I played tight end for 17 years in the NFL, and I played quarterback in college. Come down to Jacksonville, and I'll turn you into a tight end. And I'm like, what? And I was not, didn't believe this. And my pro day was kind of interesting. Belichick had me do DB drills, Bill Belichick. Yeah. And so that kind of started this whole process of me doing other positions at pro day. I ran routes. I threw. I thought it was like, I'm a quarterback. Like, that's what I do. And lo and behold, I ended up going to Jacksonville as a free agent tight end, and I transitioned to that position. And then, I got cut, and the Saints signed me in 2009. And we put the whooping on the Vikings in the NFC Championship game. And so I was on the practice squad, but it's, practice squad or not, you're on the team, and it's really cool. And we won the Super Bowl, which was great. And I think my time in the NFL was not for long. Yeah. It was just long enough for me to learn a lot and apply all that to Puris. And I think about some of the leaders and things that happened specifically on that road to winning a Super Bowl, with the dynamic between Drew Brees and Sean Payton and John Vilma, and how they handled situations at the time I took for granted, but now I reflect. And it was true definition of what leaders do. Managing tension and being tough. But at the same time, loving up on people. And that balance of, novelty but strict process. And how that balance is in a 24-week season as a rookie, that grind, that's real. Yeah. And you're questioning everything. Am I tough enough? Am I going to get cut? All of these things. And those leaders get you to just put it all in. And then when you win, Coach Payton said, first meeting back, he said, well, this is funny because I'm plant-based guy now. But he said, gentlemen, once you have filet mignon, you never eat roast beef. You never will order it. Super Bowl or bust. He walks out of the meeting room, and he set the standard that you either win a Super Bowl or it's a failure of a season. And that's, 10 years later, they haven't been back.
So he used, just a frame. His frame was meat.
Exactly.
It was so simple, but yet, what effect did it have on you at that age?
It made you realize that that's a standard. Like, what happened last year, great, congrats, doesn't matter. Next.
Only one solution. There's only one way.
That's intense.
Yeah.
And so the magic and all the things that have to happen to get there, it's so unique. And I could tell stories about that season, those 24 weeks, over and over and over. But what I remember the most and what I take back is those memories, but also the relationships now, because you can tap into those people that operate at such a high level all the time and hyper focus on their actions. I always joke, if businesses had fans, think how much better we would be. We would be like all over it. You want to make the perfect Excel spreadsheet, the crowd goes wild. Yeah. That would be amazing, but that's just not the way it is. So you kind of have to manufacture excitement in some cases in business.
It's funny, but yet profound too. Like, the perfect Excel spreadsheet because there's so many elements and so many unsung heroes in the business that make things happen. I mean, how many people that are sort of your silent, invisible hands around you? But you said something I want to go back to. Mm-hmm. You said that the strong leaders, are the ones that manage tension. What do you mean by that? And get specific.
So you are the brain expert, so I'm not going to go too deep.
Go deep. Just have fun.
So I'll go surface level on how the brain works. I'd like you to build upon it because it'll make it better. But just like a good movie, if a movie starts out dull and there's no tension, there's no excitement, there's nothing like on the edge of the seat, the best that movie can probably be is it's okay.
Yeah.
Even if it comes back and it's super exciting. And I think I might have stole this from 5 Dysfunctions of the Team. I'm not sure. But if you think about the best movies, that get you hooked.
Yeah.
They have a mixture of you falling in love with the character and risking it all.
Yeah.
Early and often. And you're hooked and you're locked in. That creates tension. And that there's a chemical reaction in your brain. Tension and dopamine equals attention.
Yes.
And you want to get attention. So I think you see a lot of leaders, and I'm a victim of this too, and salespeople too, where you just rapport, jump, how high? You're doing whatever the other person you're talking to is saying, but they're not paying attention.
Yeah.
Because there's no tension part of the attention.
Yeah.
I think that is missed a lot in leadership.
So missed.
And it's, what's the perfect amount? Who knows? The perfect amount, though, is when you have people's attention.
Yeah.
And if you do the opposite, if you're all tension, then people go so far below the line, your language, to apathetic, and they don't hear you anymore because that's dull tension.
And there's no out.
Yeah, it's just all the time.
There's no payoff to the tension.
Right.
So I think we've had the discussion, too, around how do you create that tension. And it's a subject that works in branding. It works in the biggest ads, like the best ads pop tension, unspoken tension, right? The thing that you're like, oh, like a good joke, a good meme is funny because it breaks an unspoken truth,
right.
A cultural tension. You're like, that's so hilarious because I knew it was there. I didn't know how to say it and I never did say it, but you said it. Oh, thank God.
Right.
And I think you're saying, how do you create, because we're talking about influence, right?
That's right.
And how do you do that in capturing attention, because if you don't have attention, you're not influencing. And go to that formula again. It was dopamine,
norepinephrine.
Norepinephrine.
The combination is attention.
Yeah.
So good and stress creates attention.
I love it.
And I think there's some leaders who say, "Hey, stress free." Perfect harmony is scary too.
Yeah.
And that's certainly from 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Good conflict, creative conflict.
Exactly. And those are the best teams where John Getzinger, who's our CMO, he always talks about how businesses take on, family businesses take on the dynamic of the family. Yeah. And he's like, if you're ever around the Lorenzens, they love each other. They got each other's back through thick and thin. Everyone knows that.
Yeah.
It's just fact. But yet they'll argue like they hate each other. And, I just was with my family a couple days ago, and we have heated debates and different perspectives on a lot of things, and we're arguing, but it is coming from a place of love on the backside. Yeah. So if you love someone, but yet are so open and honest, even when you don't agree, you can get to decisions that are really smart. You can get there really fast, and you see some of the best teams that are like that. And so at Puris, we're creating a culture, a shared language where people are open. People are not always super kind, but we know we got each other's back. So we've created an environment where you can be real. And then that allows us to move quicker, make decisions faster, and really get the decisions closer to the problem. So that scale.
I love it. And let's go back to this topic here. So you and I both have, and you introduced me to the book Pitch Anything.
Right.
You'd said, you got to reach Pitch. I have no idea what the book is. And I started reading it. I'm like, wow.
Well, let me set the frame right.
Okay, go for it.
So I'm in this, first of all, I get introduced to you by a friend that I just take any meeting that Jason Kuntz tells me to take, I take. So he's like, you got to meet this guy. I'm like, okay, do it.
Yep.
So you come in, you have a notebook, you're dressed like you always are dressed, and you start going in, asking us questions and telling a narrative about our situation that I'm like, yeah. And you set the frame. Yeah, really this expert frame of everything that we were dealing with without you actually knowing what we were dealing with. We'd start telling you, like, so let me repeat back what you just said to me, Tyler. So we're on the same page. And it was just right. And you started saying your, story, teach, tool, frame, message, tie down. And I was like, oh, you're framing the frame. Like, I'm all about frames. Have you heard of this pitch anything? And you said, what are you talking about? And that was when we both realized that our context of frame was slightly different, but so close. And I think for me, it's been powerful learning yours.
Oh, it's been.
Oren Clapp, I mean, he's a frame master.
We'll give him a hats off in the interview. A little nod for Oren. No, but when I started realizing, because framing came for me in just studying neuroscience. Right. Just there's this concept, and that's everything I've done has been like, okay, there's this thing here, but shit, what does it mean over here? And then all of a sudden start using it, and then being in situations where, because you said, like, I learned how to do this by studying people like your dad. Right? And I do want to talk about your dad in a minute. Or even people like you if I was younger, right? It's like, how is he so this way? And I'd sit and watch because I wasn't that way. And then you realize there's a science to it, and then this guy writes this book. So, because those that are listening to us, I want to take framing to that next level.
Okay.
And where you have really mastered the different specific kinds of frames. I mean, I've watched, and that's why I love hanging out. You're like, expert frame, moral authority frame. And you start just kind of naming all of them, and I'm just like, and to me, I'm just like, oh, this is fun. Let's see, because I'm watching and observing. There's one, so first of all, walk me through some of the ones that you really enjoy, and then I want to ask you a real specific question.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, so Oren puts a lot of language to just the different types of frames. And he talks about it from a perspective that when you go into any business situation, really any conversation, but any business situation, there's going to be a dominant frame and a weaker frame. Mm-hmm. And that ultimately just understanding that that's reality is first and foremost. And if your goal, whether you're in sales, you're raising money, whatever you're trying to do, you have to eradicate neediness and change the frame so you can communicate to a listener that doesn't want to listen.
So pause there. So the listeners, if you're fighting what you just said, if you're listening to this, that there's a weaker frame and a more powerful frame. Mm-hmm. If you're fighting that, if you think that there's a sense of reality in human dynamics that I think we all have to accept, is what I'm hearing you say. And business has rules. We didn't create them. Right. And we have to play by them. It's like football has rules, baseball has rules. Business has those rules, and one of them is that it's like there is a competition there. There is one is weaker and one is stronger. And that doesn't mean weak doesn't mean loss too. Yeah. But one is going to win. Could be positive, could be negative. But keep going.
And he talks about that that balance as a social hierarchy, which you start tying that down to what does that really mean? Yeah. But ultimately, what he's getting at is if I'm a sales guy and I want to sell you something, you have the dominant frame because I'm trying to get you to buy.
I have the leverage.
Exactly, you have the leverage. Yeah. But for a seller to be successful, you can't think like that. Yeah. You have to understand the buyer because, let's face it, we're in a buyer's world. We're not in a seller's world. There's not a selling process. There's a buyer's process. Buyers have too many options. They can go everywhere. They can buy whatever they want. They can search it online. They can order it, Amazon.
Have it overnight or in hours.
Whatever. So if you're a seller, you have to really understand, what do you bring to the table and what value do you have? Because that is the only way to prevent yourself from looking needy.
That's what you meant by eradicate neediness on your part, or the seller's part.
Exactly.
Desperateness or things.
Example would be if you're selling something and you walk into an account that you could sell them product. You have it. It's right in your bag. But you have to establish it. You don't sell it to anybody. You're choosy on the sellers that you sell to. And that's not an easy conversation to people that are uncomfortable talking like that. But in reality, it's just like having a friend. We can choose who we are friends and not friends with. Yeah. And some people are uncomfortable by saying no to someone that wants to be a friend. And I really think that the different frame busters, but controlling the narrative by really understanding what you bring to the table in that buyer's journey and what matters to them and their vantage point, their perspective, their frame, and labeling that lets you communicate better. So if you are, say I'm selling you, really fancy rocks.
Like diamond rocks.
Like diamond rocks.
Okay.
But you're an innovator around diamond rocks.
All right.
First thing I'm going to say isn't going to be price. Because you're an innovator.
Yeah.
You want to know what's so cool about these diamond rocks that allow you to be the diamond rock expert and be the cool person with the diamond rocks. Let's say you're a procurement guy of the diamond rocks. You care about price a lot.
Yeah.
You really care about price a lot, and that's all you want to talk about. So if I'm a seller and I lead with price, guess what? All I have to offer? Price. Yeah. So I have to have a scarcity frame and let you know that we don't have unlimited amount of diamond rocks. We're going to really try to understand if we're a good fit first, and then we could talk about all the features and benefits and the price. Eventually we'll get to the price, but let's establish that there's a relationship here. Because in the end, as a seller, you got to be choosy. And it's no different than dating. If you're too needy, people will take advantage of you. And that's not fair. It's just how it is.
Have you ever used any of your past successes in important meetings to establish a frame where maybe had you not had that, it would have been highly out of your favor? It's
a really fair question. I get it all the time. Like, hey, do you just wear your Super Bowl ring? This or that. I don't wear it.
I've actually never seen you wear it.
I wear it every time the Saints play the Vikings just to send pictures to my team. Yeah. But that hasn't actually gone that well for the Saints lately, so I probably need to quit that concept. But you're right on, right? And what you're talking about, as it would be labeled, would be an intrigue frame. Meaning, how do you, if you've lost the audience, if you lost the intention of the audience, how do you create something of intrigue? And so I've never used, my Super Bowl ring per se to establish intrigue by any means, but through conversation, telling stories about sports, telling things that really happened to me, creates a narrative and changes the perspective of the conversation to something that's intriguing, which creates attention. Then you can bring the conversation back to what you were talking about. Now, that happens a lot. Most of the time, frankly speaking, I don't bring up sports. The buyer does, or whoever I'm talking to brings it up because it's people like talking about football, and it is fun to talk about. And there was probably maybe a few years ago when I was trying to prove myself as a businessman, I was against this concept of the athlete past. Now I look at it more as that's a decade ago. I can still get around a little bit, but I'm washed up in the world of pro sports. And that's totally cool. So we can talk about the past a little bit. But
I want to say one thing on that too is as long as I've known you, I've never once seen you wear it. You've never offered out a story unless we're hanging out and it's relevant with the boys and it's a good time. And I want the listeners to understand that you understand. Like I'll give you a frame to this. I came up with a saying recently. It says, "Use a story to deliver me a message. Don't waste my time to tell me a story." Right. So you're using the story. Story is a framing device. Use the framing device to deliver me a message. Don't use my time to use a framing device. This is a framing device. This ring is a framing device. And what I admire about you is, one, your humility to not always pull it up, but then your strategic business mind to go, hold on, this is a tool. And damn it, I've earned that tool. And I'm going to use it for good. God bless Drew Brees,
I agree with you completely. So to me, I really think that, as people like you, for example, you're so good, and I'm not this way. I'm way too rough around the edges for people to be like, oh, yeah, he's, too articulate. Say improper grammar. I keep it real. But people like you that are so polished have to really start managing that ability to use frames, use story, use narrative, kind of too much. Because then the viewer is like, here we go again. Too much polish is bad. Here we go again. Another story, another story, another story. So again, it's if that's always your go-to, you're losing novelty. Oh, yes. So then you've explain novelty. Well, the brain. Yeah, but let's talk about novelty. The brain likes new things. Yeah. But if that's your only play, it's not new anymore. If this is your only thing, and you don't have the chops, you're done. Don't tell me a story. Or tell me a story, or use a story to deliver me a message. Don't use my time to tell me a story, but then just change out story for framing device. It's like, use a framing device to tell me a story. Don't
waste my time to share a framing device because there's no purpose for it then.
That's right.
There has to be a purpose. And talking about this, would
you like to hold this?
Of course I'd like to hold this
Here
thing.
You go.
Yeah, I mean, I've been staring at it the entire time.
So he made me bring this, okay? So I didn't randomly have it in my car.
I didn't. I begged you to bring it. Let's just be real. I begged you to. I said, dude, hey, it really might help ratings. No, I'm just kidding.
So it's COVID. I've set up my own personal office in the basement, no windows. My whole frame is embrace isolation. The rustle and tussle of everyday life, traffic, this and that, hustle and the bustle, whatever. Now we are forced to isolate ourselves. Embrace it.
Yeah.
Be Clark Kent, go to Smallville, be Superman, and go to the Fortress of Solitude and just find your zen. So I build my office in a no-window room in my basement.
Nice.
And set up the shelves, and I was thinking, okay, what do I need? I need all my books. I'm going to embrace my sports past and set up a nice Zoom background with my football helmets and
nice.
little entourage of what I once did. So I am embracing that. There's a nice home on that shelf with some of my rings.
So I want to, for those listening, I don't have a Super Bowl ring,
right?
But I have a speaker reel. That's my Super Bowl ring.
That's right.
Right? And in the sense of that's my big framing device.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that one thing that I spent an ungodly amount of money on to capture a history in a perfect, succinct manner to show and create, he knows what he's doing.
Right.
And that creates leverage for me. And so those that are listening to say, okay, if you don't have one, then you got to start figuring out what is that one thing. And maybe it's a story about a past, or maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a story about a coaching thing, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Right.
And it doesn't. My speaker reel took me 20 years to build. Mm-hmm. So it's not like something you say, okay, go build one. It's a journey to continually build those, and they become part of the arsenal.
You taught me this language, ethos, pathos, logos. And really what you're talking about is ethos, right? How do you build street cred?
Absolutely.
And I think there's nothing more powerful than someone that has it than to dose it out. And specifically in environments where group selling is required, so people are vetting out your team.
Yeah.
They're there. You've already got through that weird, prospecting and trying to get a lead in. And the hardest part, I think, in sales to not look needy when you really just want to land the appointment to be real.
Yeah.
Like what's the LinkedIn?
Yeah, are you going 6 money-making activities on me?
No, but I'm with you. I did read that today. Those are great. And yes, and then establish the appointment and then, go to the next thing. But with that step in it,
the
LinkedIn message to the person that you don't know, but you know that there's value you can add to them, and all you have to do is get into the same room or same Zoom call and share that value, and they'll be all in. But it's so hard.
You get past that one.
That script and that ability for people to do that, get those people on your team. Because I struggle at teaching that. But what I was saying is once you land that passing around ethos is critical. And
Beautiful.
As a leader, that's something that you can do that makes your team that much more powerful. Because if you're that one-man funnel because you're so good or this or that, you're not going to scale. You're not going to be any good. And that's, what I'm good at is convincing people to join Puris that are way better than me. So the last thing I want to do is be the person. I want those guys to handle it because they're better at the thing. And they'll do it much better, and the customer will be happier, and everyone will be more successful. And that's been probably the most joyful thing to do. One is convincing my sister to quit biomedical engineering and come do all the things that I'm terrible at, which she's really good at.
Brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant at. And then she's one example of many people to convince leaving their jobs, like Rick O'Hara, for example, coming to Puris and industrializing our business and just building a team that's kicks ass, and we have a lot of fun.
I'm going to switch gears on you a little bit.
Okay.
You are one of the most unique people I've met. And not that you're just a typical white guy that plays sports. It's in your mindset and your background, your beliefs, but also your relentless commitment to excellence. I would say we're friends, but there's no room for anything less than excellence. And it has been one of the best things that's happened in my career. And so I mean that like as a thank you. Even though I haven't seen you in 2 months because of this whole thing, you still live here. And everything that I'm doing, I'm going, and I've got a couple people like that in my life that I'm going, hold on a second, would this meet their standard? And if there's, and it's a huge gift. Now, having met your father, I see where it comes from. So tell me, this is just you and I talking. I want to hear, what's your dad mean to you?
First of all, he's my hero. Just flat out. I told him, I was with him this weekend, and I was like, Dad, my sister has a son, Cameron, and Cameron looks at my brother-in-law, Jordan, like he's Michael Jordan, literally. He does a backflip or does whatever, shoots a shot, catches the ball, and he idolizes him. And I said, Dad, that's me. That was me as a kid, and what's so cool is now, we're grown-ups and we're still buddies, and you're still my hero. Yeah. And isn't always roses. It's not always good. It's exhausting working with your family at times. What I remember and what I've learned the most from my childhood, but just spending time with my dad, is he has an attitude where he really believes anything is possible. Like anything. He actually thinks the human mind is the limitation to everything. That if you could pull out probably the neocortex, the doubt, all the analysts, going through all the reasons why this shouldn't happen. If you could just remove that, he thinks humans could do anything. And that to me is really good balance for like what's the potential, what's possible, so you can live a life where it's exponential, and the possible is really attainable. But I think through that process, my dad established that I could go get anything that I dreamed of. My mom established that it takes a certain style of a person to deserve that. She's built this, I would call it moral compass of sorts that says, look, good things happen to good people as long as you do good. The likelihood of good things happen to you is much greater. And that combined with my dad's belief that anything is possible has really kind of built how I go about life. And I look at it in a way that if anything is possible, but yet you set a standard for less than what's possible, you've just created a ceiling for everyone around you, because that's a new standard. But if you set a standard that's higher and you continually challenge that standard and open to new ideas, open to old ideas, just open, then what's possible of those standards is always to improve. And that's really what the team has brought, what Nicole, my sister, has brought to me, is being so good at whatever it is that they do. Partners, investors, friends, they help you set new standards. And you just have to be open enough that, you don't have it all figured out. No one does. And if you look back 10 years from now and say, man, I was stupid back then, that's awesome. So that means you grew so much. And so just soak it all in and keep setting a higher standard. And, I think the Drew Breeses of the world, people like that, you see them operate and you're like, whoa.
You got a chance to be around, a Drew Brees, and you've even interactions with Tom Brady. Is that right?
Yeah, just not limited, but you see them. I think from afar you just see these guys are really got their stuff together. Oh man, they're a great family guy. They're great on TV. Everything they say is genius. But what shows up is when you're with them every day, and they're making the most money on the team, and they're there at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
And when they're not the fastest guy, but yet they're tying you in a sprint, and you're like,
how is that possible?
This guy is outworking me, and he just played on Sunday. Those types of things remind me that hard work is an advantage. And having a chip on your shoulder and recognizing that hard work can equalize or give you that edge, shoot, I'm going to work hard. That is for sure.
That's the only thing I had. I sucked in school. I barely made the teams, and work was the only thing I can control. It's the only thing. Yeah, I feel you. And so there's a difference between people who say the mind is a limitation, we're the only limits. It becomes such a cliche.
Yeah, I know.
But then there's those rare, and when I say rare few that truly believe it, and that's your dad. And when I want to go deeper and double click on that or zoom in on that.
Yeah.
Even in my conversations with him, he's talking about sustainable food in countries that don't have it by planting something. He's talking about changing governments. He's talking about, his mind is limitless. It is one of the most, at first you're like, is this real? And then you realize 3 hours later it's going, this is really real. Mm-hmm. And then, what was that? So what were some of your memories as a kid seeing that?
Well, the business we're running today is to a T what he said would happen.
Tell us that. I would love to hear that story.
So
Beginning there.
Imagine you're 6 years old, working in a field in Iowa. Your family has limited to no money, and your sister is literally a walking genius. So she skips school, doesn't even go, and travels around the Midwest working in the field with my dad planting. That
was Nicole. She skipped school and still was a genius.
Oh yeah, 100%. I couldn't skip school because I wasn't smart enough.
Yeah.
So my older sister handled it, and he told us back then. He goes, "You guys, you're working very hard right now. Your life is different than other kids, but you don't really put it all together.
It's just normal.
It just is." He goes, and someday this is how it's all going to play out. People are going to need to eat plants instead of animal meat to get their protein. The world's going from 7.5 to 10 billion people. It sounds cliche now.
Yeah.
But back then, this was different.
Nobody was saying that.
And he said it's going to take a system that's more sustainable and works for everyone. It's got to work for the farmer. It's got to work for the eaters. It has to taste good. They have to love the food or they won't keep eating it. We have to build a system that makes it happen. So he said what we would do. We would have a system of the base of genetics, so seeds. And on one side, we'd have ingredient technology. On the other side, we'd have food technology. And we'd build what he called at the time the world food system. And he shared a vision that we would be a huge company. And he said, whatever you think it's going to be, he still says this to me every day, it's going to be 10 times bigger. Never stop, keep going, and just believe. And his belief is that we choose the dimension of reality we live in. And so choose the one you want and don't doubt. And one of his sayings he reminded me before I played every game was success is not being afraid to fail. And just if the worst thing in the world can happen and you accept that, and you don't blink, you can do anything. You have to eliminate doubt so you can go be what your potential is.
What a gift to have that at that age.
Yeah. I didn't realize it too.
Yeah.
I told him that this past weekend, I'm like, Dad, my dad was my playmate, my best friend. Like, I'm so lucky. Yeah. Cameron's so lucky to have Jordan. Like, this is incredible and fortunate. And you see, like, a lot of people don't get that. So I think as one of my passions is seeing some of my college teammates really expand that influence to, with absent of a dad in their life, to go impact people that aren't in the same position as I was with a ridiculously awesome mom and dad that were, 24 years old, super young, but just awesome. Yeah. And I had a great childhood. And then how can you make that and help fill those gaps to really let people realize that, you can choose. You may not have the same opportunities today. Don't let that stop you. Figure it out. Keep going. Keep looking. Keep wanting more. Keep aspiring to be great. And, it just may happen to you. It's got to happen to someone.
That's so awesome, dude. Thank you for sharing that. I'll give you one final question.
Okay.
So
I'm bummed that this is over.
I know, dude. Let's go back to some of your moments that you've been able to, because I really want to drive home framing and Tiedowns, right? Because that's when we talk about Tiedowns for a little bit. Okay. Because our audience here is probably still struggling. They're getting it, they're seeing frames when they walk, they're learning how to tell stories, but it's a stumbling process for a while, right? So what was when you first learned about Tiedowns? Tell me about what you learned. How would you explain it? Because there's how I explain it, and there's a million videos out there on that. Mm-hmm. How do you explain it? How are you utilizing it? And maybe if you have any examples.
Yeah. Tiedowns are awesome. First of all, what a better word to say than action items, to-do lists. Like, all right, what do we got to tie down? It's vocabulary, it's language at Puris now. It's funny how often people say, oh, we need to tie that down. And to me, what that means is you have to tie it down from the person you're talking to's perspective. So speak in terms that they care about, not you care about. And one of my business colleagues, her name's Bria, and she's a wizard in marketing. And she always talks about that's a bunch of we marketing. No one cares about we. People care about themselves and want to be entertained, period. And so if you're not entertaining, which I'm not in the entertainment business, we better talk about them. And tying it down is making something about the person, creating action, creating resolve, creating an anchor about the audience. So the audience can see it, the things that they care about. So when we think about what does that mean in a business setting, I think a lot of leaders say, man, I wish, or owners, man, I wish my employees would act like owners. Why don't they act like they own the place?
They're not.
Because they're not. And you haven't created an environment where they have enough upside and success.
Yeah.
So let's tie things down to matter to the audience or to the team about what's the stake and the outcome do they have. And so when we look at planning and setting goals and really going through, a message, a change process, change management is a critical time for a frame, message, tie down.
Yeah.
Bring it back to what matters to the audience. And so they can see it from a perspective they can relate to, because in the end, people care about themselves and want to talk about themselves.
It's funny is people don't like hearing that. I was even talking to Tara and saying, okay, I'll give you an example. Just scroll and tell me when you feel like stopping. And it's like, you're only going to stop when you care. You're not going to stop and go, I wonder what they meant to tell me.
Exactly.
Bet you there's a message behind this vague photo.
And this is why it's a buyer's process. Back when it was just a David Meerman Scott. So a few authors shape how I think about David Meerman Scott and Joe Paluzzi in marketing. Awesome. He has a book about new rules of sales and service, new rules of marketing. He talks about it's a buyer's process because back in the day, there was NBC, CBS, ABC. Everyone watched the same shows, and there was always commercials, and you couldn't fast forward the commercials.
Yeah.
So
we weren't in control.
You weren't in control. So it was a seller's process. They would tell you what are the things to buy. There was Glad and there was the in-store brand. And Glad would run, I'm just making up an example, would run all the reasons why that is worth $1 more than the Walmart brand or whatever. And you start seeing how has media changed. Well, I don't know the last time you've watched a commercial, but I don't watch them. YouTube now has commercials, and it drives me crazy. Skip, right? That is interrupting marketing, but buyers are in control.
Yeah.
How fast will we switch off if there's an ad on Facebook so quick?
Yeah.
So I think that's changed the process, and it has to change how marketers, sellers, and people that own businesses. And
but you're saying we're also, as we speak, we're marketing and selling.
And that's what I was going to say is people cringe at the word of seller.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you're selling me. We're all
selling.
In sales. If you run a business, if you're in a company that you care about, every one of you are selling. When you talk to a person that asks you what you're doing, you're selling. Mm-hmm. You don't know you are, but you're selling a vision.
Idea.
Maybe an idea. Maybe you're recruiting. Maybe you're just trying to show how you're doing all right in life. Whatever it is. And I think when you start embracing that selling's not a bad word, because you realize that selling's about sharing value and creating value for others, then it changes the whole paradigm. And I really think buyers and customers that are long-term start seeing you from that perspective and changes your relationship. Like when you call me, I'm excited because I know the value I'm going to get from one phone call. It may be 2 minutes or it may be an hour, but we're going to do something that is going to be powerful.
Yeah.
And same goes hopefully for the way Puris interacts with ours, and that's our intent.
Well, that's the goal, right? That means a lot. You said that. And that's one of those things that when you value the relationship, you hear that, and the moment I stop trying to be that is the moment it starts going away.
Yeah.
And not because the friendship doesn't supersede value. That's the thing in a business environment. It doesn't matter. And I tell people that if you're ever doing business with friends, or if you become friends with the people you do business with, the moment friendship enters the game, you should double and triple down on the value.
That's right.
And only because the closeness, just by definition, starts to diminish value. It's just by definition.
Right.
Anything you get close to is you just take it for granted.
Well, it diminishes novelty too.
It's not novel anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So there's
that's great.
We were in the process of, okay, how are we going to close this? I was trying to figure out, the budgets, and I feel like I'm shooting in the dark, all that kind of stuff, and everything happening, and then COVID.
Boom.
Shit. And I'm like, this is not the time to ask for money. It's just not the time. But I stopped that all around. It was one of those things I'm like, and somebody said, why? Like, why'd you do that? I said, the only analogy frame I had was, I honestly felt that everything that I have been researching and studying, my life's work, was perfectly suited for right now. The moment I saw the NBA canceled, the moment, whether you agree that this is a big deal or not, is I knew irrationality was coming. Mm-hmm. And when irrationality comes, fear comes. And when fear comes, poor decisions start happening. I can't stop that, but maybe I can shine light on our choice of above the line, below the line. Let's keep it simple, friend, label, right? That's a beautiful label. Just make it above the line, below the line. Maybe I can shine a light on what's happening in the brain. So we talked about the brain model. And if I can shine a light on those things, that maybe this is my time to do that. And then I thought too, everyone's going to go silent and not do that. This is where I've got to triple down and just put everything. And I just flooded everything I had out there.
I think you'll look back a year from now and be thankful that you were forced to change your model.
Yeah.
Because you're going to learn new skill sets that if everything would have been normal, you would have just stuck with the same strategy.
Exact same strategy.
Exact. And if I'm you, I have to think of how do I lower my acquisition cost to new customers? Because I have to do that. So, one of your biggest costs is traveling around and doing
hotel
all this
rooms
stuff.
and food.
It just adds up. And then how do you ultimately scale? And when you're a person, you have to build a system. And I think that the technology, it democratizes everything.
Yeah.
And getting good at it fast is really exponential for what is possible for your influence. And as you start weighting, the value you can give to the masses, and you start looking at as the currency versus dollars, game over. That's what you can do, what you've done for myself and Puris, and what you have done for everyone that works with you. That's going to be what you do for everyone that watches those videos. And those subtle impacts start adding up, and then your influence, which is really the currency that you operate under, is exponential. And thank goodness for the internet. Bill Gates invented it, so...
Wasn't it Al Gore?
Oh, yeah, Al Gore. That's right.
One of those guys.
Bill Gates, Al Gore, same.
Thank you. That's awesome. You're right. There's so many things I want to talk about. So talk to me about, for those listening, I have been a carnivore at heart, Cuban. Yeah. I eat every part of the pig you can imagine. I pride myself in cooking the best steaks and meats and everything. And I met you, and now I still eat meat, but I'm telling you, I see it a lot differently now. And plants make their way into my life a lot more than they did before. And there was a period of time where I'm like, I'm going to try this plant strong stuff for a little while.
Right.
I mean, your ability to take my culture, my history, my pride, and shift it speaks volumes of what Puris' message is. So can you just tell us, just have some fun.
Yeah. So,
let your heart speak on Puris.
So Puris is a plant-based protein company. And we find that telling people not to eat meat or don't eat dairy or don't eat this or that, or a restriction diet, which is really all diets, how they're framed up, is basically a short-term plan. It's not going to allow the masses to scale. So we changed that narrative. We said, no, it's a plant-strong diet.
Love it.
Try to eat more plants. Try to work towards having a whole food plant-based diet, more plants on your plate at all meals. Yes, buy some stuff that has Puris in it. And when you can have an equal or better experience that happens to be from plants, there's some health impacts. There's certainly some environmental impacts that are better. Yeah. And we highly encourage you to give it a try. And if you like it, call us and we can help you really find some really great products that you can incorporate into a lifestyle. For me, I've been plant-based or plant-strong for 7 years now. And I always was a very plant-forward eater. And it was challenging as an athlete because the training, really the whey protein, dairy proteins, that's all.
Well, and the culture too, though.
That's a culture. Like you can't be strong unless you eat meat or, whey. And that has been, disproven time and time again.
And horses and everything.
Yeah, but there's different kind of stomachs. But in the end, you eat protein to get amino acids. You need amino acids because there's 9 of them that are essential that you have to consume through diet. Your body makes amino acids, but when you consume food, you have to get them. Well, animals have all amino acids because they're mammals. Yeah. And so they've ate plants and then produced those amino acids. So you consume an egg, meat, or dairy, you get all your amino acids. I'm not arguing that. But you can also get all your amino acids from plants. And to me, what Puris has gotten good at is taking those amino acids, those proteins, and building foods that you're used to eating.
They taste good.
Yeah. And make dieting enjoyable. So it's not dieting, it's a lifestyle. And I think in the world of dieting, it's kind of like politics. People get so
Emotional
about it,
and
like
protective.
Paleo diet or carnivore diet
Keto.
or plant-based or keto. And all in all, they're pretty close. Eating a bunch of whole foods that are plants is a positive thing.
And lowering caloric intake.
But
you eliminate one macro and it's lower.
So I think human understanding of nutrition isn't that great personally.
Yeah.
I think there's a whole bunch of science that supports the old way of food. And as the policy and really academia follows currency, so as the economic support and more investment in studying and proving out plant-based diets, I think there'll be more and more science that starts coming to the forefront that plant-based eating is really powerful.
Well, it's definitely a movement. You see people saying, I'm plant-based now, I'm plant-based. I love the plant strong frame because it doesn't mean that I am leaving my carnivore meats. It doesn't mean that I am not doing it. Just means that but it can mean that I'm only plant.
That's right.
Or it can mean that I really enjoy the benefits of, and I believe in all. It's such a beautiful, forward-thinking, but I don't even know the word. But
it's just positive versus negative.
Yeah.
So you can avoid and talk about what I don't do, or you can talk about what you do.
What is I'm doing.
And that's, to me, is what it's all about.
Yeah.
And it's not for everyone, and we don't need it to be for everyone. But as long as the movement continues, and we can create food that people love to eat, and they're mind blown that it comes from a pea, then we're doing a great job. And that's what we're proving is possible. With you see exponential growth in the category. Plant-based meats, for example, are the highest growing category in grocery right now. The data was crazy. Everything's growing because people were freaking out about COVID, rightfully so, but plant-based is even growing faster. Now you're seeing grocery shelves that are having issues stocking up their animal proteins because of challenges with the supply chain. So, what's another way of getting your amino acids?
Plant-based protein.
Plant-based. So it's a moment. The world's at a tipping point. I think the nutrition side is one frame for sure, but there's probably a bigger impact that happens in the environment when you start building systems of agriculture that are more efficient and create less energy or take less energy to create the same amount of food. It's pretty impactful stuff.
So 2 more questions because we got about 3 minutes, and I want to see if we can answer both. And if you can't answer the first one, that's okay. But you were able to raise a pretty significant amount of money, and that happened through your presentation, and obviously through framing. And I'm not claiming any of that. That is your team and what you did. But you used framing, presentation, and great, the business fundamentals to do that. Can you give me just a minute on what you did and how you used framing for that?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, if your business doesn't have the chops, you may be able to go get some dumb money and get people to invest. That runs out pretty fast. That doesn't last long. If your business has chops, then using techniques to communicate your message to get really smart money, that adds a ton of value, that helps you scale and make a business of great purpose happen. That's where you want to use these techniques. And for us, it was, there's certain process that's really in place to raise capital. Raising investment capital isn't always the best thing. It's highly dilutive. It's challenging in its own, but you have to do what you have to do to grow. So when I think of funding as debt, so monies that bank will loan, they have no upside. They only look at the risk. And then equity, which is cash, they have participation in the upside. They own something. They have equity in it. So we went after both, but as we built more funding through equity, we had to really position how we were seeing a change from a current situation to a new, and how we had a unique unlock to help our partners and our investors to have participation in that change. And as things change, we have a unique advantage to not only participate in that change, but to win. But the change is the story. The change is the story. Yeah. And I think that's the critical piece. Of course, all your financials,
assuming all that is there,
has to be there. And if it's not there, don't waste your time.
But you had to create a compelling message for them to go, we want to be a part of that, and a message that was told in a way that fit their strategy.
Exactly.
And so, can you share how much you raised?
It's over $100 million.
Yeah, so this is real money. I mean,
yeah, it's a significant amount, and it's been a multitude of rounds. We had our initial strategy was family offices, so people that have a long-term hold.
What, for anybody watching this, they're going through Amplify, what advice would you give them? Whatever you want to say.
That's a tremendously good question. I think anyone going needs to embrace feeling uncomfortable. It's amazing how out of place you feel when you start doing Amplify. And if you don't embrace that and choose to get nothing out of it, that obviously is a path you could take. But if you really embrace being uncomfortable and trying to improve yourself in those 48 hours, every moment, you got to be locked in. You really will amplify your influence. There's no doubt about it. I've seen it happen across my business. I've seen people change their whole way of presenting anything, way that just communicating to anyone. And I think I think you're just getting started, frankly, my friend. I do think Amplify is a unique approach to maximize your influence. And it's really exciting to see more and more people leverage the techniques. But what I like to see is your heart and your passion being spread amongst more people, because that, to me, is your currency and your influence, and you are the best in the world at it.
Dude, you're going to make me cry now, man. Thank you.
That's okay.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you.
Love you, dude.
Thanks for making time for this, man.
This is awesome.
This was good. This is first of many. We're going to do more.
This is fun.
Okay, good. We're going to do another one.
My thanks.
I remember watching your progression on Cheddar. On, what was it?
The CNBC
CNBC. And I remember you getting, because you go on there, they're not there to make you look great. They're there to crush you. And I remember watching them ask you the questions, and the moment they start asking the tough questions, instead of cowering, you'd start smiling, nodding your head. We loved that question. I'd watch you lean in, and it was so cool to watch. Just like you controlled that narrative through body language. You weren't even saying anything. You'd sit there and they would be just trying to catch you off guard. I mean, that's when they win, right? It's like, oh, we made them look stupid, and you were just smiling and just answer that question. What did you do to prepare for that?
Well, I think ultimately the preparation probably happened back in college. When you played the game and they put cameras right in your face and you're 20 years old, and things went well, things went bad, and they don't give you any break. They act like you're a pro. So you get used to it, one. But I think something I was told a long time ago was look into the camera. And that's hard.
Yeah.
And just because that's what you're talking to, that's what you see. You don't see a person. You don't see the reaction. You just hear them.
Yep.
And you have to look into the camera. But I think preparing for that, I'm sure there's a bunch of people that could teach you how to be better and, look better, act better presence, and say better things. But preparing for that type of questioning, and really it's just knowing your stuff.
Yeah.
If you know your business, if you know your field, they don't. They know what they know, and they're trying to trip you up. You better know what's coming and understanding those frames, because they're going to hit you with the analyst frame over and over and over again.
The analyst frame. Know your stuff. I think what you said there is relevant now, because one of the things that I'm trying to bring forth is an understanding of the digital body language. That the influence zone before was our belly button to our eyes, but now your hands are down here. I'm in the influence zone, but not in the new influence zone, which is up here, and it's like a physical difference. Almost like it can get tiring.
Right.
But if I'm not in the box of framing. So I think, and the other thing too is I'm looking at the screen where I see everybody, but the camera may be there.
Exactly.
And so I've got to start looking at here and almost sacrifice the responses.
Exactly.
It's a tough world.
And the responses are delayed. It is tricky, and everyone's setup is different too. I think in general, though, speaking with confidence and being direct and clear about your intentions and talking about things the audience cares about is the only way. Yeah. It's the only way, and it's. I think I love Zoom now. I do think the hardest part going forward will be when satellite folks stay out of office and then teams come back together, because each person having their own face, that changes. But now having a group conference, video conference, it's not the same. So behaviors will change, my friend, because beliefs has shifted.
Dude, I fucking love you. Thank you so much. This is so helpful. Awesome.
Thank you for sharing this time with us. If the experience resonated with you, follow us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or AmplifyMyLife.com. Share it with anyone else who's ready to amplify their lives. And remember to let our hearts speak in sequence. For more from Rene Rodriguez, visit meetrene.com.